The lightning split the sky like a jagged knife, illuminating the muddy crossroads where Jonas Bradford pulled his horse to a stop, rain pouring down his weathered face as he spotted the lone figure standing in the middle of the intersection, soaked to the bone and seemingly lost in thought despite the violent storm raging around them. Jonas squinted through the downpour, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip before he realized the figure was a woman, her dark hair plastered against her face, her dress clinging to her frame. She held the reins of a chestnut mare who stood patiently beside her, both woman and horse looking equally miserable in the Nebraska storm. The year was 1878, and Jonas had seen plenty of strange things in his 32 years, but a woman standing alone at a crossroads in the middle of a thunderstorm was certainly among the oddest. "Madam," he called out, urging his stallion forward, "you all right?" The woman turned to face him, and even through the sheets of rain, Jonas could see her eyes were a striking shade of green that seemed to glow in the frequent flashes of lightning. She was probably in her late 20s, with strong features and a determined set to her jaw that spoke of resilience rather than fear. "I am fine," she shouted back over the thunder. Just trying to decide which path to take, Jonas looked at the crossroads. The path to the left led toward the small town of Kearney, Nebraska, where he had been heading to deliver a message for the ranch owner he worked for. The path to the right led deeper into the plains, toward settlements that were scattered and dangerous. The path straight ahead went toward the river, which would be flooding in this weather. The path behind them led back to whatever she had been running from, which Jonas suspected was something given the determined look on her face. "Well, madam, if you are looking for shelter and civilization, Kearney is about 5 miles that way," he said, pointing left. "But we need to get moving before this storm gets worse. Lightning has a way of finding the highest point, and right now that is us." She nodded, seeming to make up her mind in that instant. "Kearney it is, then." Jonas did not wait for further discussion. He nudged his horse forward, and the woman mounted her mare, falling into step beside him. The storm continued to rage around them, turning the road into a river of mud that sucked at the horse's hooves with every step. Thunder rolled across the prairie like cannon fire, and the rain came down so hard it was difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. "Name is Jonas Bradford," he called out, wanting to break the strange tension of riding in silence with a complete stranger through such miserable conditions. "Zara Brennan," she replied, her voice carrying despite the storm. "Thank you for the guidance. I have been traveling for 3 days and got turned around when the storm hit." "Where are you coming from?" "Kansas City originally. Been moving west looking for work. I am a school teacher by trade, but I can do other work too. Cooking, sewing, bookkeeping, whatever needs doing." Jonas glanced at her, surprised. Most women traveling alone in these parts were either running from something or toward something desperate. A school teacher was a respected profession, one that usually came with community support and stability. For her to be out here alone suggested a story he was not sure he should ask about. They rode in silence for a while longer, the storm beginning to ease slightly as they drew closer to town. The rain lessened from a torrential downpour to a steady drumming, and the lightning moved farther away, its thunder becoming a distant rumble rather than an earth-shaking crash. "What about you?" Zara asked as they navigated around a large puddle. "You live in Kearney." "Work at a ranch about 10 miles north of town. Barton Ranch, if you have heard of it. Been there about 5 years now. Good work, good people. You are a cowboy, then?" "That I am. Not the most glamorous life, but it suits me fine." As they crested a small hill, the lights of Kearney came into view, warm and welcoming against the dark, storm-swept night. Jonas felt a sense of relief wash over him, and he noticed Zara straighten in her saddle, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten at the sight of their destination. The town was small but growing, with a main street lined with wooden buildings that housed the general store, a saloon, a boarding house, the land office, and various other establishments necessary for frontier life. The railroad had come through a few years back, bringing with it the promise of progress and connection to the larger world beyond the Nebraska plains. Jonas led them directly to the boarding house, a two-story structure run by a widow named Mrs. Margaret Coleman. He dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post, then moved to help Zara down from her mare. She accepted his hand, her fingers cold and wet against his calloused palm. "Mrs. Coleman runs a respectable place," Jonas explained as they climbed the steps to the covered porch, finally out of the rain. "She will have a room for you and probably some hot food if you are hungry." "I am grateful," Zara said, and Jonas could hear the exhaustion in her voice now that they were safe. He knocked on the door, and after a moment it swung open to reveal Mrs. Coleman herself, a stout woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "Jonas Bradford, what brings you into town on such a miserable night?" she asked, then noticed Zara standing behind him. Her expression softened immediately. "Oh, you poor dear, you are soaked through. Come in, come in." She ushered them both inside, closing the door firmly against the storm. The interior of the boarding house was warm and dry, with oil lamps casting a golden glow over the simple but clean furnishings. A fire crackled in the fireplace, and Jonas could smell something delicious cooking in the kitchen beyond. "Mrs. Coleman, this is Miss Zara Brennan. She was caught in the storm and needs a room for the night, maybe longer. Miss Brennan is a schoolteacher looking for work." Mrs. Coleman's eyes lit up at that. "A schoolteacher? Well, that is fortunate timing indeed. Our last teacher left 2 months ago to get married and move to California. The town council has been desperately seeking a replacement. Can you start immediately?" Zara looked stunned by this turn of fortune. Yes, I suppose I could. I would need to see the schoolhouse and understand the arrangements, but yes, I am very interested." "Wonderful. We will discuss the details in the morning. For now, let us get you into some dry clothes and feed you a proper meal. Jonas, you staying the night as well?" Jonas hesitated. He had planned to deliver his message and ride back to the ranch, but the storm was still raging outside, and the idea of a warm bed was increasingly appealing. "If you have a room available, I would appreciate it. Of course. You know I always have space for you, Jonas. Now, both of you go get dried off. I will have food ready in 20 minutes." Mrs. Coleman showed Zara to a room on the second floor while Jonas took his usual room, a small space at the end of the hall that he used whenever business brought him to town. He changed into the spare clothes he kept in his saddlebag, rough work pants and a clean shirt, then combed his wet hair back from his face. When he looked in the small mirror above the wash basin, he was surprised by what he saw. His gray eyes looked brighter than usual, and there was something in his expression he could not quite name. He pushed the thought aside and headed downstairs, where Mrs. Coleman had set out a meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and hot coffee. Zara appeared a few minutes later, wearing a simple blue dress that Mrs. Coleman must have loaned her. Her dark hair was still damp but had been combed back and braided, revealing a face that Jonas found himself unable to stop looking at. She was beautiful, but it was more than that. There was intelligence in those green eyes and strength, and something else that drew him like a moth to flame. They sat at the dining table, and for a while, the only sounds were the storm outside and the clink of spoons against bowls. Jonas was hungrier than he had realized, and from the way Zara ate, She had not had a proper meal in some time. "So," Mrs. Coleman said, pouring more coffee for them both, "tell me about your experience teaching, Miss Brennan." Zara set down her spoon and took a sip of coffee before answering. "I taught in Kansas City for 6 years at a school for girls. Before that, I attended a teacher's college in St. Louis. I can teach reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, and basic science. I have also taught music and art when resources allowed." "That is impressive, Mrs. Coleman said with genuine admiration. "Our school serves children from ages 6 to 14, all in one room. About 20 children on a good day, though attendance can be spotty when harvest time comes around or when families need the children to work. It is not fancy, but the community takes education seriously." "That sounds perfect," Zara said, and Jonas could see the relief in her expression. A job meant stability, safety, a future. All things that had clearly been uncertain for her until tonight. "What made you leave Kansas City?" Jonas asked, then immediately regretted the question when he saw Zara's face close off slightly. She was quiet for a moment, her fingers wrapped around her coffee cup. "My father died 2 years ago. My mother passed when I was young. I had been living with my aunt and uncle, but when my uncle's business failed, they decided to move east to live with my uncle's family. They wanted me to come with them, but I needed to make my own way. I have always wanted to see the West, to be part of something new and growing. So I saved my money and decided to take the chance." It was a carefully edited version of the truth, Jonas suspected, but he respected her privacy. Everyone out here had a past they were trying to escape or a future they were trying to build. Often both. "Well, you made a brave choice, Mrs. Coleman said warmly. "And I think you will find Kearney to be a good place to start over. We are a small community, but we look after our own." They finished their meal, and Jonas found himself lingering over his coffee, reluctant to end the evening even though exhaustion was pulling at him. Zara covered a yawn with her hand, and Mrs. Coleman noticed immediately. "Off to bed with you both," she declared in a tone that brooked no argument. "There will be plenty of time for talking in the morning." Jonas stood, nodding his agreement. "Thank you for the meal, Mrs. Coleman. And Miss Brennan, it was a pleasure meeting you. I hope things work out well with the teaching position." Zara stood as well, offering him a smile that made his heart do something strange in his chest. "Thank you, Mr. Bradford. I would likely still be standing at that crossroads if you had not come along. Jonas, please, and I am glad I could help." They climbed the stairs together, their rooms being on the same floor. When they reached Zara's door, she paused, her hand on the doorknob. "I mean it, Jonas. Thank you. You did not have to stop or help me, but you did. That says something about your character." Jonas found himself at a loss for words, which was unusual for him. "Anyone would have done the same," he finally managed. "No," Zara said softly. "They would not have. Good night, Jonas." "Good night, Zara." He watched her disappear into her room before heading to his own, lying awake long after he should have been asleep, listening to the storm gradually fade and thinking about green eyes and a woman standing at a crossroads, waiting for her life to begin. Morning came with clear skies and the fresh, clean smell that always followed a storm. Jonas woke early out of habit, dressed, and headed downstairs to find Mrs. Coleman already up and preparing breakfast. The boarding house had 3 other guests, a traveling salesman and an elderly couple passing through on their way to visit their daughter in Wyoming, but Jonas barely noticed them. His attention was focused on the stairs, waiting for Zara to appear. When she did, wearing the same blue dress from the night before but looking rested and more confident in the morning light, Jonas felt that strange sensation in his chest again. He was 32 years old and had known his share of women, but none had ever affected him quite like this. "Good morning," she said, taking the seat across from him at the table. "Morning. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in weeks. A real bed and a roof over my head works wonders. Mrs. Coleman served them eggs, bacon, and biscuits, and as they ate, she explained that the town council would be meeting that morning, and she had already sent word that there was a qualified teacher interested in the position. The meeting was set for 10 o'clock at the town hall. "I need to deliver a message to the land office," Jonas said, "but I could walk you to the meeting if you would like." "I would appreciate that," Zara replied. After breakfast, Jonas collected his message from his saddlebag and they set out into the bright morning. The streets of Kearney were muddy from the storm, but the sun was already working to dry them out. People were emerging from their homes and businesses, assessing any damage and getting on with their day. Jonas noticed several people giving him and Zara curious looks as they walked together, and he realized that by tomorrow, the whole town would be speculating about the new schoolteacher and the cowboy who had brought her to town. They stopped first at the land office, where Jonas delivered his message to the clerk, a transaction that took only a few minutes. Then they continued to the town hall, a modest building that served multiple purposes including town meetings, social gatherings, and occasional church services when the traveling preacher came through. "Nervous?" Jonas asked as they approached. "A little," Zara admitted. "But I am good at what I do. If they give me a chance, I will prove it." "I do not doubt that for a second." They entered the town hall to find 5 men already seated at a long table. Jonas recognized them all. Mayor Thompson, a prosperous merchant in his 50s, Sheriff Davies, a former Texas Ranger who had settled in Kearney 3 years ago, Reverend Patterson, who led the small congregation, Dr. Mitchell, the town's only physician, and Sam Hutchinson, who owned the largest ranch in the area. "Jonas," the mayor greeted him warmly. "Mrs. Coleman said you found our teacher for us." "Just happened to be in the right place at the right time, Mayor. This is Miss Zara Brennan." Zara stepped forward with confidence, and over the next hour, Jonas watched as she impressed every man in the room with her qualifications, her intelligence, and her obvious dedication to education. They asked her about her experience, her teaching methods, her expectations for the students, and her ability to handle the challenges of a one-room schoolhouse on the frontier. Jonas found himself admiring not just her beauty but her competence, the way she answered questions directly and thoughtfully, the way she asked intelligent questions of her own about resources, curriculum, and community support. By the end of the interview, it was clear that the position was hers if she wanted it. "The salary is $35 a month," Mayor Thompson explained. "The schoolhouse includes living quarters, a small room in the back with a bed, stove, and basic furnishings. You would be expected to teach 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, with Sundays off. School runs from 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. We provide firewood for heating, and families take turns supplying additional resources. Does this sound acceptable?" "Very acceptable," Zara said. "When would you like me to start? How about Monday? That gives you a few days to settle in and prepare." "Monday is perfect." They shook hands all around, and Jonas felt a surge of pride as if her success was somehow his as well. As they left the town hall, Zara was beaming, her entire face transformed by joy. "I cannot believe it," she said. "A job, a place to live, a fresh start, and it all happened because I chose to go left at that crossroads instead of right. Fate has a way of working out sometimes," Jonas said. They walked back toward the boarding house, but Jonas found himself reluctant to say goodbye. He had to return to the ranch, but the thought of leaving Kearney and Zara felt wrong somehow. "Would you like to see the schoolhouse?" he found himself asking. I have time before I need to head back, and I know where it is. I would love that. The schoolhouse was on the edge of town, a simple wooden structure with a bell tower and a small porch. Jonas helped Zara up the steps and pushed open the door, which was unlocked. Inside, the space was clean but spare, with rows of wooden benches serving as desks, a large slate board at the front, and a pot-bellied stove in the corner. Shelves lined one wall, holding a modest collection of books and supplies. "It is perfect," Zara said, walking around the room and running her fingers over the desks. "I can already imagine the children here, learning and growing." Jonas showed her the living quarters in the back, which were basic but adequate. The room contained a narrow bed, a small table with 2 chairs, a washstand, and the promised stove. A window looked out onto a small yard that could potentially be used for a garden. "It is not fancy," Jonas said, suddenly aware of how humble it all was. "It is mine," Zara replied. "My own space, my own life, my own future. That is worth more than all the fancy things in the world." They stood there in the small room, and Jonas realized how close they were standing. He could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could smell the faint scent of lavender that clung to the dress Mrs. Coleman had loaned her. His heart was pounding in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. "Zara," he said, her name feeling both foreign and familiar on his tongue. "I know we just met, but I would like to call on you, properly, I mean, if that is something you would be interested in." She looked up at him, and he saw surprise in her expression, followed by something warmer. "I would like that very much, Jonas. I am not in town often, but I could come on Sundays. Maybe we could have dinner together or go for a walk, or whatever you would like." "That sounds wonderful." They stood there a moment longer, and Jonas felt as if they were on the edge of something significant, something that could change both their lives forever. Then reality intruded in the form of the church bell ringing noon, reminding him that he needed to get back to the ranch. "I should go," he said reluctantly, "but I will see you Sunday. I could come after church services. I will be here." They walked back to the boarding house together, where Jonas collected his horse and prepared for the ride back to Barton Ranch. Zara stood on the porch, and Jonas found himself memorizing the way she looked in the late morning sun, the way the light caught in her dark hair and made her skin glow. "Safe travels, Jonas Bradford," she said. "Take care of yourself, Zara Brennan." He rode out of town with his heart feeling lighter than it had in years, already counting the days until Sunday. The Barton Ranch was a sprawling operation covering several thousand acres of Nebraska prairie. The main house was a solid 2-story structure built of stone and timber, designed to withstand both the harsh winters and the occasional tornado. Surrounding it were the bunkhouse for the ranch hands, the stables, several barns, corrals, and various outbuildings. Jonas had been working there for 5 years, starting as a simple ranch hand and gradually earning the trust and respect of the owner, Thomas Barton. Now he served as the foreman, overseeing the day-to-day operations and managing the crew of 15 men who worked the ranch. It was good, honest work, and Jonas had been content with his life until yesterday. Now, as he rode up to the main house to report to Mr. Barton, he felt a restlessness he had never experienced before. The ranch suddenly seemed isolated, the work routine and predictable. He found his thoughts drifting to green eyes, and a woman who chose to stand at a crossroads in the rain rather than make the wrong decision. Thomas Barton was in his study when Jonas knocked, a room lined with books and maps that reflected the owner's educated background. Barton had come west from Boston 20 years ago, bringing with him Eastern money and Eastern ideas about how to run a successful cattle operation. It had worked, and the Barton Ranch was now one of the most prosperous in the region. "Jonas, come in," Barton called. He was a tall man in his early 60s with silver hair and keen eyes that had seen and understood more than most. "How was your trip to Kearney? Any problems?" "None, sir. Delivered the message to the land office as requested. The paperwork for the additional land should be processed within the week." "Good, good. Anything else happen in town?" Jonas hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding it. "I met someone. A woman. She was caught in the storm at the Crossroads, lost and alone. I helped her into town, and as it turns out, she is a schoolteacher. The town council hired her to run the school." Barton leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing at his lips. "A woman, you say? This is interesting. Jonas, in the 5 years you have worked here, I have never known you to show interest in any of the ladies in town. Must be something special about this one." "She is different," Jonas admitted. "Smart, independent, brave. She came all the way from Kansas City by herself, looking to make a new life." "And you intend to court her?" "I do. If that is acceptable to you, sir. I know my responsibilities here, but I was hoping to have Sundays free to visit her in town." "Jonas, you work harder than any 3 men combined. You have more than earned the right to a personal life. Take your Sundays, and if things progress, we will adjust as needed. I would like to see you settled and happy. You deserve that." "Thank you, sir." Jonas spent the rest of the week throwing himself into his work, but his thoughts kept drifting to Zara. He wondered how she was settling into the schoolhouse, whether she was nervous about her first day of teaching, whether she thought about him as often as he thought about her. It seemed impossible that they had known each other for less than a day, yet he could not remember a time when she had not been part of his thoughts. The ranch hands noticed his distraction and teased him mercilessly once they learned the cause. Jonas took it good-naturedly, even as he deflected their questions about when they would get to meet the woman who had so thoroughly captured their foreman's attention. Sunday morning finally arrived, and Jonas woke before dawn, unable to sleep from anticipation. He bathed and shaved carefully, put on his best shirt and pants, and polished his boots until they gleamed. The other ranch hands whistled and called out encouragement as he saddled his horse, and even Mr. Barton came out to wish him well. The ride to Kearney seemed to take forever, though Jonas knew it was the same 2 hours it had always been. His stomach was tied in knots in a way it never had been before a cattle drive or a difficult negotiation. This felt more important, more significant than anything he had done in recent memory. He arrived in town around mid-morning, just as church services were letting out. Jonas tied his horse outside the church and joined the crowd spilling out onto the street. He spotted Zara almost immediately, standing near the church steps and talking with Mrs. Coleman and several other women. She was wearing a different dress today, a soft green that matched her eyes, and her hair was pulled back in an elegant style that made her look even more beautiful than he remembered. Their eyes met across the crowd, and Jonas saw her face light up with a smile that made his heart skip. She excused herself from the group and made her way toward him, and suddenly all his nervousness disappeared. This felt right. She felt right. "Jonas," she said as she reached him. "You came. I said I would. How was your week? How was your first day of teaching? Come walk with me, and I will tell you everything." They strolled through the town, Zara telling him about the challenges and joys of her first week as a teacher. There were 23 students ranging from age 6 to 14, some eager to learn and some more interested in causing mischief. The younger children were sweet and enthusiastic, while the older ones tested her boundaries to see what they could get away with. She had spent her evenings planning lessons and organizing the schoolhouse, barely sleeping but feeling more fulfilled than she had in years. Jonas told her about life at the ranch, about the cattle and horses, about the men he worked with, and the challenges of keeping such a large operation running smoothly. He found himself sharing stories he had never told anyone, memories from his childhood in Missouri before his parents died and he headed west, dreams he had barely admitted to himself. They had dinner at the small restaurant in town, a simple meal of roast chicken and vegetables that tasted like the finest cuisine because of the company. Other diners watched them with interest, and Jonas knew that by evening, everyone in Kearney would know that the new schoolteacher and Jonas Bradford were courting. After dinner, they walked to the edge of town where the prairie opened up in endless waves of grass. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, and in the distance, they could see the occasional farmhouse or the dark shapes of cattle grazing. "It is beautiful here," Zara said softly. "I never imagined the West would be like this, so vast and open and full of possibility." "It can be harsh too," Jonas warned. "Winters are brutal, summers can be scorching. There are droughts and storms and all manner of hardships. Life out here is not easy." "I do not need easy," Zara replied, turning to look at him. "I need honest, I need real. I need a life where I can make my own choices and build my own future. That is worth any hardship." Jonas reached out and took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I am glad you chose to go left at that crossroads, Zara. So am I." They stood there as the sun set. Two people who had been strangers a week ago but felt as if they had known each other for a lifetime. Jonas knew it was too soon to speak of love, too soon to make promises, but he also knew with absolute certainty that this woman had changed everything. The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable pattern. Jonas came to Kearney every Sunday, and he and Zara would spend the day together, talking and walking and getting to know each other in the gradual way that builds a solid foundation. She told him about growing up in Kansas City, about her mother's death when she was young and her father's struggle to raise her alone while working as a clerk in a law office. She told him about her love of books and learning, about the dreams she had of making a difference in children's lives. Jonas shared his own story, about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about losing both his parents to cholera when he was 18, about drifting west looking for work and purpose. He told her about the years of learning his trade, about finding his place at the Barton Ranch, about the satisfaction of building something even if it was not his own land. As autumn progressed and the leaves turned gold and red, their relationship deepened. Jonas found himself falling in love with everything about Zara. Her intelligence and humor, her dedication to her students, her courage in facing each new challenge. She was strong without being hard, gentle without being weak, independent while still allowing him to be part of her life. One Sunday in late October, after they had been courting for 2 months, Jonas made a decision. He rode into town with a small box in his pocket, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. He found Zara at the schoolhouse, where she was preparing lessons for the following week. "Jonas," she said, her face lighting up as it always did when she saw him. "I was not expecting you for another hour. I know, I could not wait. Zara, can we talk?" Something in his tone made her set down her pen and give him her full attention. "Of course. What is it?" Jonas took her hands in his, gathering his courage. "I know we have only known each other for 2 months. I know some people would say that is not enough time to make this kind of decision. But Zara, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your passion for life. I love the way you make me want to be a better man. I love how I feel when I am with you, like I am exactly where I am supposed to be." Tears were beginning to form in Zara's eyes, and she squeezed his hands tightly. "I do not have much to offer," Jonas continued. "I am a ranch foreman, not a wealthy man, but I work hard and I am good at what I do. Mr. Barton has been talking about selling me a piece of land at the edge of his property, enough to start my own small operation. It would not be much at first, but we could build something together, a life that is ours. He released one of her hands to pull the small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "Zara Brennan, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The tears were flowing freely down Zara's face now, but she was smiling, her whole face radiant with joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Jonas, 1,000 times yes. I love you too. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you stopped at that crossroads, when you could have ridden on, but chose to help a stranger instead. You are the best man I have ever known, and I would be honored to be your wife." Jonas slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the pent-up emotion and love he had been holding back. She kissed him back with equal passion, and in that moment, everything else fell away. There was only the two of them, two people who had chosen the same path and were now choosing to walk it together forever. They were married 6 weeks later, in the same church where they had first seen each other after he brought her to town. The whole community turned out for the wedding, having taken Zara to their hearts as their teacher and Jonas as one of their own. Mrs. Coleman cried through the entire ceremony, and Mr. Barton served as Jonas's best man, a gesture that touched Jonas deeply. Zara wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Coleman and several other ladies in town had helped her make, and she carried a bouquet of the last wildflowers of the season. Jonas wore a new suit that he had purchased especially for the occasion, and when Reverend Patterson pronounced them husband and wife, Jonas felt as if his heart might burst from happiness. The reception was held in the town hall, with food and dancing and toasts to the new couple's happiness. As Jonas danced with his wife, holding her close and breathing in the scent of her hair, he sent up a silent prayer of thanks for the storm that had brought them together, for the crossroads where their paths had met, for the choice they had both made to go in the same direction. That night, in the small room behind the schoolhouse that was now their temporary home, they came together as husband and wife for the first time. Jonas was gentle and patient, mindful of Zara's inexperience, and their physical union felt like the natural extension of the emotional and spiritual bond they had already forged. Afterward, lying tangled together in the narrow bed, Jonas felt a sense of peace and contentment he had never known before. "What are you thinking?" Zara asked, tracing patterns on his chest with her finger. "That I am the luckiest man alive, that I cannot imagine my life without you in it. That I am grateful for every single event that led us both to that crossroads." "I was thinking the same thing," Zara said softly. "Well, except that I am the luckiest woman alive, we can both be lucky." "Yes, I think we can." They talked late into the night, making plans for their future. Mr. Barton had indeed offered to sell Jonas 200 acres at the edge of the ranch property at a price Jonas could afford, with the understanding that he would continue to work as foreman while gradually building his own herd. It would take years to establish themselves fully, but they were both young and strong and willing to work for their dreams. Zara would continue teaching for now, but they both hoped to start a family eventually. They talked about building a house on their land, about raising children who would know the value of hard work and education, about growing old together on the Nebraska prairie. Winter arrived with its customary harshness, bringing snow and ice and brutal cold. Jonas continued to work at the ranch during the week, but he arranged his schedule so he could spend every evening and night with Zara in town. It meant long rides in difficult conditions, but he never complained. Being apart from her, even for a day, felt wrong, and he was willing to endure any hardship to spend his nights in her arms. Zara thrived as a teacher, earning the respect and affection of her students and their parents. She started a lending library in the schoolhouse, encouraging families to donate books and allowing people to borrow them freely. She organized spelling bees and recitations, making learning fun and engaging. Under her guidance, attendance improved and test scores rose, and the town council congratulated themselves on their excellent choice of teacher. In February, Zara discovered she was pregnant. She told Jonas one evening when he arrived at the schoolhouse after a long day of work, taking his cold hands in hers and placing them on her still flat stomach. "There is someone new you need to meet," she said with a mysterious smile. Jonas looked at her in confusion, then understanding dawned. "Zara, are we? We are going to have a baby, Jonas. In late summer, according to Dr. Mitchell." Jonas let out a whoop of joy that could probably be heard throughout Kearney, then swept Zara into his arms and spun her around despite her laughing protests. A baby. Their baby. Another piece of their future taking shape. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Zara continued teaching through the spring, her expanding belly a source of great interest to her students, especially the girls who peppered her with questions about babies and motherhood. Jonas became even more protective, insisting that she not overexert herself and worrying constantly about her health. In April, they broke ground on their new house, a sturdy wooden structure that would eventually have 3 bedrooms, a parlor, a kitchen, and a real glass window in every room. Jonas and several ranch hands from Barton Ranch did most of the work, along with men from town who volunteered their time and skills. It was the frontier way, neighbors helping neighbors build the community that would sustain them all. Zara spent her last day of teaching in early August, as the baby was due any day, and Dr. Mitchell insisted she needed to rest. Her students gave her a tearful goodbye, though she assured them she would return after the baby was born, and the town council had already agreed to hold her position for her. The house was finished just in time. It stood on a gentle rise, with a view of the prairie stretching endlessly in all directions. It was not large or fancy, but it was solid and well built, and it was theirs. They moved in on a Saturday, and that night, lying in their own bedroom in their own house, Jonas held Zara and felt overwhelmed by gratitude for everything they had built together in less than a year. Their son was born on a sweltering August night after 12 hours of labor. Jonas paced outside the bedroom, listening to Zara's cries and feeling helpless and terrified. Mrs. Coleman and Dr. Mitchell attended the birth, and when Jonas finally heard the thin wail of a newborn, he nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Coleman emerged from the bedroom with a smile. "You have a son, Jonas, a healthy baby boy, and your wife is doing fine." Jonas pushed into the room to find Zara propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face, and Jonas thought he had never seen anything more beautiful in his entire life. "Meet your son," she said, holding the baby out to him. Jonas took the infant with shaking hands, looking down at the tiny red face, the closed eyes, the perfect miniature fingers that were clenched into fists. His son. His and Zara's son. "What should we name him?" Zara asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at this perfect little person, Jonas knew exactly what felt right. "What about William Bradford? We could call him Will." "William," Zara repeated, testing it. "Yes, that is perfect. Hello, Will. Welcome to the world." The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Will was a good baby, but he still woke every few hours to eat, and there were nights when both Jonas and Zara stumbled through their days in a fog of sleep deprivation. But there were also moments of pure magic. Will's first smile, the way he would quiet when Jonas sang to him, the fierce love that filled Jonas every time he looked at his son. Zara did return to teaching when Will was 3 months old, bringing the baby to school with her. The students were delighted, and the older girls took turns helping care for Will during lessons. It was unconventional, but the town council agreed it was better than trying to find another teacher. As Will grew from an infant to a toddler, Jonas continued to build his own herd, using his savings and careful breeding to slowly establish a small but quality group of cattle. He still worked for Mr. Barton, but spent more and more time on his own land, and Barton began talking about Jonas eventually taking over the entire operation when he retired. When Will was 2 years old, Zara became pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, and while the pregnancy was still challenging, especially while caring for an active toddler and teaching, she handled it with the same grace and strength she brought to everything in her life. Their daughter was born in April of 1882, an easier birth than Will's had been. They named her Sarah Jane, and from the moment she arrived, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Where Will was active and adventurous, Sarah was calm and observant, watching the world with serious dark eyes that missed nothing. The years flowed by, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. Jonas's herd grew, and in 1884, Mr. Barton made good on his hints and offered to sell Jonas the entire ranch, planning to retire and move to California to be near his own children. It was a tremendous opportunity, and while the price was substantial, Barton was willing to accept payment over time. Jonas and Zara discussed it long into the night, weighing the risks and opportunities. It would mean taking on significant debt, but it would also mean owning one of the largest and most successful ranches in the region. It would mean security for their children, a legacy they could pass down for generations. They decided to take the risk, and in the summer of 1884, Jonas Bradford became the owner of what was now called the Bradford Ranch. He was 38 years old, and everything he had dreamed of as a young man drifting west was now a reality. His own land, his own operation, a wife he loved beyond measure, and 2 beautiful children. Zara eventually stopped teaching when their 3rd child arrived in 1886, a boy they named Thomas after Mr. Barton. The schoolhouse got a new teacher, a young man from Iowa, and while Zara missed the work, she found fulfillment in being a full-time mother and partner in running the ranch. Life was not always easy. There were droughts that killed cattle and dried up water sources. There were harsh winters when they lost animals to cold and starvation. There were illnesses and injuries, market fluctuations that affected prices, rustlers who tried to steal their livestock. Jonas worked from dawn until long after dark, and Zara managed the household, the accounts, and the raising of their children with equal dedication. But there was also joy. There were summer evenings sitting on the porch, watching the children play while the sun set over the prairie. There were Christmas celebrations with the family gathered around the tree in their parlor. There were quiet moments in bed, Jonas and Zara wrapped around each other, talking about their day and making plans for tomorrow. There were also returns to that crossroads, now a well-traveled intersection with signposts pointing to the various destinations. Every year on the anniversary of the night they met, Jonas and Zara would ride out to that spot, just the 2 of them, and remember the storm and the choice that had changed both their lives. You ever wonder what would have happened if you had chosen a different path that night? Jonas asked one year as they sat on their horses, looking at the 4 directions stretching out from the crossroads. "Not for a second," Zara replied firmly, Every other path would have been wrong because it would not have led me to you. I feel the same way. Everything in my life before that night was just prologue. My real life started when I saw you standing in the storm, choosing your direction. We chose the same direction, Zara corrected. That is what made all the difference. Not just that first night, but every day since. Every day we choose each other, choose this life, choose to walk the same path together. And I will keep choosing you every day for the rest of my life, as I will choose you. They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting. Two people who had started as strangers and become partners in every sense of the word. Their love had grown from a spark of attraction to a deep, abiding bond that sustained them through every challenge and made every joy sweeter. As the years passed, the Bradford ranch prospered under Jonas's careful management and Zara's shrewd business sense. They added more land, improved their breeding stock, and built a reputation for quality and integrity. The children grew, and each in turn showed interest in the ranch, learning the work from both parents. Will, their eldest, grew into a tall, serious young man who loved the land as much as his father did. He had Jonas's gray eyes and Zara's intelligence, and by the time he was 16, he was working alongside Jonas as a full partner in the ranch operations. Sarah, their daughter, inherited her mother's love of learning and became a teacher herself, though she also helped with the ranch accounts and proved to have a gift for numbers that made her invaluable to the business. She was courted by several young men from the area, but she was in no hurry to marry, wanting to establish herself first. Thomas, the youngest, was the adventurous one, always pushing boundaries and exploring new things. He talked about going to California or even further west, but Jonas and Zara both knew he would eventually come back. The land had a way of calling its own home. In 1895, when Jonas was 49 and Zara 47, they became grandparents for the first time when Will married a young woman from a neighboring ranch, and they had a son. Holding his grandson for the first time, Jonas was flooded with memories of holding Will as a newborn, of all the years that had passed, of everything he and Zara had built together. "We did good," he said to Zara that night as they lay in bed. "We did better than good," she replied. "We built a life that matters. We raised good children. We created something that will last beyond us. All because of a storm and a crossroads. All because we chose to help each other. All because we chose to take a chance on something unexpected." As they entered their later years, Jonas and Zara gradually handed over more of the ranch operations to Will and his growing family, though Jonas never fully retired. He was still riding out to check on cattle well into his 60s, and Zara still kept her hand in the accounts and planning. They had worked too hard to build their life to simply step away from it. Their 50th wedding anniversary in 1929 was a grand celebration, with family coming from all over Nebraska and even from neighboring states. The ranch house had been expanded over the years and was now a sprawling complex that could accommodate the large gathering. There were children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren running through the rooms and playing in the yard. At the party, Jonas stood with Zara by his side and looked around at everything they had created. Their children, all successful and happy in their own ways. Their grandchildren, representing the future, the land they had worked so hard to preserve and improve. The community they had helped build through their commitment to Kearney and the surrounding area. 50 years, he said to Zara, taking her hand. Her hair was completely gray now, and her face was lined with age, but to Jonas, she was as beautiful as the day he first saw her standing in the storm. "Feels like both a lifetime and no time at all. The years go by so fast," Zara agreed, "but we filled them well, did we not?" better than I ever dreamed possible. That night, after the guests had left and the house was quiet, Jonas and Zara went for one last ride to the Crossroads. They were both too old to make the journey on horseback, so they took the automobile that Will had purchased for them, one of the few concessions to modernity that Jonas had accepted. They stood at the crossroads under the stars, and Jonas remembered the lightning and rain, the lost young woman and the cowboy who stopped to help. It seemed like yesterday and like a million years ago all at once. "I would do it all again," he said. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. All of it exactly as it happened." "As would I," Zara said, leaning into him. "We were so young and foolish, deciding our entire futures in a moment at a crossroads in a storm. We had no idea what we were getting into. Maybe that was the beauty of it. We did not overthink it. We just knew. We did know. From the very beginning, we knew." Jonas pulled her close, and they kissed under the stars, two people who had spent 50 years walking the same path, who had never separated despite the countless challenges and changes life had thrown at them. They had chosen each other at a crossroads in a storm, and they kept choosing each other every single day since. As they drove back to the ranch, Jonas thought about the young man he had been, drifting and searching for something he could not quite name. That young man had found what he was looking for in a woman standing at a crossroads, and in finding her, had found himself. The Bradford ranch continued to thrive under Will's management, and Jonas and Zara lived to see their great-grandchildren learn to ride horses and help with the cattle. They lived to see automobiles become common, to hear radio broadcasts, to watch the world change in ways they never could have imagined when they first met in 1878. Jonas passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1935, at the age of 89, with Zara holding his hand. His last words to her were the same as his first promise. "I will always choose you." Zara lived another 3 years, spending her days surrounded by the family she and Jonas had created, telling stories about the old days and the cowboy who had stopped at a crossroads to help a woman in a storm. She passed away in 1938, at the age of 90, and when the family went through her belongings, they found journal after journal filled with her thoughts and memories and love letters to Jonas that she had never sent because he was always right there beside her. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple shared headstone that read, "Jonas and Zara Bradford. They chose the same path and never separated." The Bradford ranch remained in the family for generations, a testament to what two people could build when they chose to face life together. And though times changed and the West became less wild, the story of Jonas and Zara was passed down through the family, a reminder that sometimes the best decisions are made in moments of uncertainty, when you follow your heart and choose to help a stranger at a crossroads in a storm. Their love story became legend in Kearney, told and retold until it took on the quality of myth. But for those who knew them, who watched them build their life together over 57 years of marriage, it was simply the truth. Two people who found each other when they needed it most, who chose the same path, and who never, ever separated. The crossroads where they met eventually became known as Bradford Crossing, marked with a historic sign telling the story of the cowboy and the schoolteacher who met there during a storm in 1878. Young couples would sometimes drive out to the spot, standing where Jonas and Zara had stood, making wishes about their own futures. And if you listened carefully on stormy nights, some claimed you could still hear the echo of horse hooves and see the shadow of two figures standing at the crossroads, choosing their path together, over and over again, for all eternity. The legacy of Jonas and Zara Bradford lived on not just in the land and the family they built, but in the example they set for how to live a life of purpose, partnership, and enduring love. They proved that sometimes the most important decision you can make is to help a stranger, that the best paths are chosen in moments of uncertainty, and that true love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every single day. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that we are all standing at crossroads constantly, faced with decisions that could change everything. The key is to have the courage to choose, to follow your instincts, and to never separate from the people and values that matter most. Jonas and Zara had done exactly that, and in doing so, they had built something that would last forever.